Ben knew what he was doing. I knew what I was doing. I mean, I'm not making excuses at all. It was wrong. What I did was wrong. Look, if I could take it all back, honestly, I would. I mean, the nightmare I've lived for 2 years is I've lost my job, I've lost my marriage, I've been to prison.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing super well. I have missed you guys so much. Thank you all for being so patient with me. Today, we're going to be talking about a very important topic. Lately, I have been seeing so many news reports about how female teachers are being arrested for abusing their students. So these are cases where a female is a predator and a male is the victim. To me, when I read these news reports, I'm just utterly disgusted and it's just really disturbing. And it's also just really sad how common this is happening. I personally see it as wrong, and I'm sure most of you guys also see this as wrong, but there's actually a handful of people that do not understand how a female predator is just as bad as a male predator. There are a handful of people in the comments on these news articles talking about how lucky that male student was to fulfill the fantasy of sleeping with a hot teacher. Those types of remarks just really emphasize how there is a double standard when it comes to a male predator versus a female predator. Regardless of gender, I believe that teachers are there to protect children. They're there to be a positive figure in their life, help educate, and develop them. So reading about how so many teachers are crossing those boundaries and abusing their students is very upsetting, and it's something that needs to be talked about more. Anytime people talk about sexual assault, you just automatically associate it with the female victim. Of course, I'm not making this video to minimize the importance of that. I'm making this video because I just want to bring awareness to male assault victims, to the long-lasting effects that it can have on them, and how we as a society just need to remember that male victims of sexual abuse do exist. I think I want to turn this into a series because as I was doing the research for this, there were just way too many cases to talk about where a teacher crosses a line and gets involved with the student. And it wasn't just female with male, it was also male and female students. Again, it's just sad how common this is and how this is even a problem, but I will definitely not be able to fit everything into one video. So yeah, I guess this is part 1 of this series on female predators. I'm gonna have a couple of resources linked down below that can give you more information about sexual abuse, and I'm also going to be making a donation to Rain on behalf of La Familia. Now, real quick before we jump into this video, I do just want to take a quick moment to thank today's sponsor. Thank you to Helix Sleep for sponsoring today's video and supporting this channel. Helix Sleep makes premium mattresses and bedding that are customized to fit your needs and conveniently shipped right to your door. The Helix lineup offers 20 unique mattresses, including their award-winning Luxe and Ultra Premium Elite collections. They offer the Helix Plus, a mattress designed for big and tall sleepers, and they also offer their Helix Kids mattress, which is designed for growing bodies and endorsed by child sleep and medical experts. So, how do you get your hands on a Helix mattress? Well, you can start by taking their online quiz. Every body is different, and Helix knows that, so they made a sleep quiz that matches your unique body type and sleep preferences to the perfect mattress for you. If you sleep with your partner, you can take the quiz together to find something that's the perfect compromise for the both of you. I did the quiz and I got matched with the Dusk Luxe mattress. I sleep on my back, so I need something that's really soft. I also upgraded to the Glossio Tex cooling cover, which has been amazing. It's so perfect for the summertime because it keeps me cool and comfortable while I sleep. What I really enjoy most about my Helix mattress is the quality. I've had some rough mattresses in the past, so it feels good to have one that's comfortable, that helps me sleep better, and one that my partner also enjoys. I also really love the fact that Helix Sleep is fiberglass free. Fiberglass can be very harmful to your health, and so many other mattress companies use fiberglass as a flame retardant, but Helix has their own manufacturing facility, which is entirely free from products containing fiberglass. Honestly, the best part about this is that Helix delivers your mattress straight to your door with free shipping in the US. The mattress comes rolled up in a box and it's super easy to set up yourself. They also offer a 100-night sleep trial, so you get more than 3 months to make sure that you love your mattress. They also offer a 10-year warranty, and they even offer financing options and flexible payment plans, so a great night's sleep is never far away. I love my Helix mattress mattress, and I think that you would too. If you're looking for a new bed, check out Helix Sleep. Their Memorial Day sale is running now through May 30th, and it's a great time to upgrade your mattress. You can get 30% off an Elite or Luxe mattress plus 2 free pillows, or take advantage of 25% off site-wide. Make sure to click the link in the description box down below for more details. Thank you again to Helix Sleep for sponsoring today's video, and now let's jump right into today's case. Let's start off by talking about Karen Ellis. Karen Louise Ellis was a 36-year-old mother of 3 living in Melbourne, Australia with her husband Stephen. She was a physical education teacher at a nearby school, and to the outside world, it just seemed like Karen had everything. She had this stunning home, a loving husband, and a beautiful family. Her husband Stephen did have to travel a lot for his work, so oftentimes Karen would be left alone with her 3 children. Stephen says that obviously he didn't like being away from his family, but that he did that for them, to provide them with an amazing life. He didn't think that his marriage with Karen was perfect. Yes, he did have to be out of town a lot, but he loved Karen. He loved the family that they had made, and to him, everything seemed to be all right. However, to Karen, things were just not okay. She just felt very lonely, and she felt as if her marriage with Stephen was on the rocks because they honestly didn't get to spend that much quality time together, again, due to his traveling. In a way, Karen felt invisible in this marriage, and she was longing for some type of affection, some type of attention, and just wanted to feel seen. Unfortunately, 36-year-old Karen decided that the person that was going to give her this attention and was going to fulfill this want for her was her 15-year-old student, Ben Dunbar. The way this started was that Ben began flirting with Karen on the basketball courts. Now again, he is 15 years old. Karen is a beautiful woman, so I'm not going to say that it's not normal for students to have crushes on their teachers, because I know that that is a very common thing for both females and males. But it's what these teachers do with that attention and with those crushes that matters. Ben started to flirt with Karen on the basketball courts, and Karen knew that this was wrong. She kept telling herself, like, hey, I need to put a pause on this. This is not okay. However, after getting to know Ben a little bit more, she says that in her eyes, Ben was very mature. He wasn't like the other 15-year-old students who were giggling on the playground or skateboarding with their friends or just misbehaving.
Ben was very mature.
Are you suggesting that Ben at 15 had the same maturity that you did at 36?
At times he did. We could stand there and talk. I mean, he wasn't a giggly, silly schoolboy. He wasn't he wasn't one that rode skateboards or did silly. He was very mature.
She said that Ben was just as mature as she was, and that when she was speaking to him, it didn't feel like she was speaking to a 15-year-old boy. It felt like she was speaking to an adult. So with that, she started flirting back with Ben, and it got to the point where she was actually looking forward to going to school just to see Ben. Yeah, she wasn't looking forward to go to school to teach and to be with her students and to do her job. It's because she was so excited to go flirt with her 15-year-old student. That's how much she was enjoying this attention, and in an interview, she said, I enjoyed going to school because I wanted to see Ben as much as he was looking forward to seeing me. So it started with them flirting with each other, which of course is already very bad. Karen should not have been engaging in this. She just should have put a stop to it right at the beginning, and she should have never flirted back with Ben, but she didn't. And they continued flirting with each other, which eventually led to them hanging out one-on-one once school ended. They would meet at the basketball courts to play basketball, to talk, and to flirt with each other. Nothing physical had happened yet until one day when they were on the basketball court, all of a sudden Ben leaned in for a kiss. Ben said that he just really wanted to go for it, so he did, and Karen kissed him back. Now, this statement from Ben stands out to a lot of people because the fact that he felt comfortable enough to be able to lean in and try to kiss Karen means that Karen was giving him those signals that she would most likely lean in as well and engage in this kiss. I feel like you just wouldn't do that to somebody unless you knew that they would reciprocate those feelings. Like, I would never just lean in and kiss somebody if I didn't think they would accept that. After sharing this kiss, things really escalated, and the two of them were now meeting up at Karen's house to have sex. Of course, they would only meet when her husband was out of town, and as for her children, I really have no idea where they were when this was happening. I don't know if they were in the house when this occurred, or if they were at school or in after-school activities. If Karen was bringing Ben over while her children were there, that is just extremely disturbing. Of course, it's disturbing in itself to know that she was bringing a 15-year-old boy to her house, but if her children were there when this was happening. So over the next 6 weeks, the two of them were meeting up at the basketball courts. From there, they would drive over to Karen's family home. They would have sex. They would talk, and then sometimes Karen would actually drive him back to school and drop him off. There was even this one time that they went to her house to have sex, and then they actually stopped at a McDonald's to get some food before dropping Ben back off at school. Karen was having sex with her 15-year-old student between October 10th and November 24th of 2003. Now, Karen states that they only had sex 6 times out of those 6 weeks. So to her, it's like, well, we weren't really doing it that much. It's not like we were doing it every single day. We only did it 6 times. And there were also these 2 instances where Ben actually slept over at her family's home. That to me was just crazy, the fact that they were having sleepovers. Now, along with the physical things that were happening between them, Karen would also text and call Ben nonstop. Over the course of those 6 weeks, she sent him almost 499 text messages, and she also received 123 voice messages from Ben. That's crazy. Almost 500 text messages in 6 weeks. We really don't know how much longer this would have continued or what their end game was, but thankfully Karen was caught. At the end of November, Karen and Ben were doing their usual routine of meeting up at the basketball courts and then driving over to the family's home when all of a sudden Ben's mother saw the two get into Karen's car outside of the school. She said that the way that they were acting didn't seem like a teacher driving her student home, helping a parent by doing that favor. To her, it looked like a husband and a wife getting into a car and leaving together. She was just shocked at this. Like, she had no idea that anything was happening with her son and that her son was being abused by his teacher. She decided to do some digging, and that's when she looked through Ben's cell phone and discovered all the messages between him and Karen. Once she read those messages and realized what was actually happening, she decided to call the police and report Karen. Karen was taken to the police station, and she was informed of what Ben's mother was accusing her of. Once she heard that Ben's mother had seen them and that she had also seen the text messages, Karen really had no other choice but to acknowledge and accept what had happened and just tell the truth. She stated that this relationship was very inappropriate, that she crossed a line, and that she knows that what she did was unlawful and that it was wrong. She said, quote, "I'm not blaming him because he was only 15, for God's sake. It was my fault. Of course, it was wrong. It should have never happened." End quote. During her interview, she started to show a little bit of regret by stating that she was a stupid teacher who took advantage of her students and that she should have known better. However, then she kind of contradicts herself by saying, well, if I were to divorce my husband tomorrow and Ben would have turned 18, I imagine that we would probably continue to see each other. She specifically said, quote, "It's not like I've just taken advantage of this child. This isn't just about sex. He's not a little boy." End quote. Now, her statements are a little bit confusing because she's saying, yes, I was wrong, I overstepped, and I should have not done this with my student. However, in another sentence, she's saying, well, if he was 18, I probably would still be with him. And no, I did not take advantage of a little boy. So it's kind of confusing, like, are you taking accountability or are you not? After her arrest, she did have to resign from her teaching position, and then pretty much the rest of the community learned about what she had done. The other teachers had to hear about this, the other parents of the school, and most importantly, her family and Ben's family had to find out. Now, when her husband learned about what his wife was doing while he was out of town, he just couldn't believe it. Stephen could not believe that his wife had been abusing her 15-year-old student. He was absolutely heartbroken, and he immediately went back home, grabbed his stuff, and he moved out because he said that he needed to take a break from the marriage. I just truly could not imagine hearing the news that while you were out of town working hard for your family, your wife was bringing over her 15-year-old student to have sex in your bed. As for Ben's family, they of course were just completely shocked, especially Ben's mother. I mean, this is her little boy, this is her son, and to learn that he had been having sex a teacher with a 36-year-old lady, it was just something unimaginable. Now, let's fast forward to the trial. Karen ended up pleading guilty because there really was no denying what had happened. There was proof in the text messages that she had sent to Ben. There were all of those recorded phone calls, and Ben had also spoken out and told the truth about what had happened. So, in the end, she admitted to 6 counts of sexual penetration with a boy under 16 years old, and this would carry a maximum sentence of at least 15 years. During the trial, she was asked, why did you do this? Like, why did you sleep with a student? Why did you cross this boundary? And her answer was, I guess in her eyes, simple. She basically blamed it on her marriage, and she said that her marriage was under a lot of strain because her husband was always away working, that he was neglecting her, and that pushed her into pursuing this relationship. And I'm saying relationship even though I don't see it as a relationship because that's how she described it, and that's also how a lot of news articles describe it. It's obviously not a relationship because she was abusing Ben. I've seen people refer to it as a relationship, and I've also seen a lot of articles claiming that they were having an affair. And I'm like, how were they having an affair when he was literally a minor? Anyway, so she was basically blaming all of this on her marriage and basically on her husband. Her defense lawyer, Brian, said that Ben and Karen's relationship was forbidden only in the eyes of the law, and he basically asked the court to spare Karen from going to jail. Again, I don't really know what he's talking about because regardless of what the law says, I just still think it's like immorally wrong for a teacher to be with her student and for an adult to be with a minor. So I don't get why he's saying that it's forbidden by the law. Like, I think he's trying to say like this was true love, like they actually loved each other, but just because the law states that they can't love each other, she is the bad guy. Now, I had mentioned earlier how her husband Steven had moved out of the house because he wanted to take a break from her marriage. Well, that break lasted a very short time because during the trial, Steven was actually there in support of his wife. He spoke out and said that he was partly to blame for what his wife did. He said, if I hadn't been so busy traveling and ignoring my wife's needs, then she would have never done this. She would have never engaged in this relationship with Ben. He specifically said, quote, she sometimes indicated that I did not show enough affection towards her. If I had seen those problems, I probably would have stopped going away. It's sad that he felt that way, that he felt like this was his fault when it's no one's fault besides Karen. No one forced her to do this, no matter how neglected she felt in her marriage, no matter how lonely she felt, no one forced her to have sex with a minor, and that was purely her decision. Steven did eventually move back into the family's house to try to repair the marriage, but in the end, it just did not work out, and he ended up divorcing Karen. Now, something that really shocked the prosecution and pretty much the entire community was that Ben defended Karen throughout the entire investigation and during the trial. In fact, they actually still kept in contact with each other throughout the entire ordeal, which to me was shocking because I would have thought that they would have made Karen cut all contact with Ben, but I guess that wasn't the case here. During the trial, Ben was now 16 years old, and he actually showed up to one of her court hearings to show support to her and said that he was not damaged by this relationship, that he did not consider himself a victim, and that he was actually upset at the fact that the court was going after Karen and that she might go to jail. He was also really upset at the fact that people were telling him how to feel or how to view himself. He didn't like that people were telling him that he was a victim, that what Karen did to him was wrong, and that he would most likely be traumatized for this for a long time. And I understand, I feel like this was a very sensitive time for Ben. So just imagine like all of these people coming up to you to tell you how much of a victim you are, how you were abused. It's probably something that you don't really want to hear, especially at 15 years old. I feel like you maybe do think that you're in love or that this person was a good person. So in a way, I understand why Ben felt frustrated with how the public was reacting to this. So that is why he actually went to the court hearing to tell the judge, hey, I'm not a victim. I am fine. Nothing bad happened here. He even went on to say that he has no regrets, that he did not believe he had been harmed by this experience, and that he was the one who pursued Karen. So in a way, she's a victim in this situation. He specifically said, quote, I'd say if it doesn't affect me now, I don't see how it's going to affect me in years to come. Now, even though Ben did not want Karen to go to prison, the prosecution did. They wanted Karen to pay for what she did, and they just felt like her actions were very gross and that she betrayed Ben's trust and that people shouldn't minimize what she did just because she is a female. They stated that if the roles were reversed and it was a 36-year-old male teacher who was abusing a 15-year-old girl, the court system would go crazy on this man and they would probably send him to jail forever. However, since it's a woman that is now the predator, a lot of people were showing more empathy towards Karen, and the prosecution was just worried that the court system would show her leniency. And they were right. In November of 2004, Judge John Smallwood sentenced Karen to a 22-month suspended jail term. The reason why the judge decided to give Karen no actual prison time is because they felt like Karen had suffered enough, that she had gone through enough shame, and that her life had basically been ruined by the situation. They were like, she lost her job, she lost her marriage, she lost her reputation, and she was now known all over Melbourne as being a pedophile. The judge stated that they felt like she had suffered enough, and he also took into consideration how the victim himself did not see himself as a victim. Along with her suspended sentence, if she ever did reoffend again, she would go straight to jail. She's also never allowed to teach again, and her name was entered into the National Registry for Sex Offenders, and she would have to be on that list for the next 15 years. So yeah, the prosecution was right. The judge did show leniency to Karen because, again, I feel like if the roles were reversed and it was a man that had done this, I doubt the judge would say, oh, he suffered so much, he has so much shame and he's already been punished enough, like, let's let him go. I really don't think that would have happened. But since it was Karen who was, basically crying at court and just felt very emotional by everything that had happened, I definitely feel like the judge saw her as just more of like a damsel in distress type of situation of like, oh, like look how much she's suffering. Like let's not make her suffer more. Now, when the community heard of her sentencing, they were shocked. They at least expected her to serve some type of jail time, so to hear that she was getting nothing was shocking. Now, of course, the prosecution was like, no, this is not happening. She needs to be punished for what she did. So in May of 2005, they submitted an appeal. The Court of Appeal looked over all of the paperwork and they actually decided to overturn her conviction. In this new resentencing, the judge said that Karen's actions weren't just a one-time foolish lapse of judgment. They said no, she was repeatedly offending Ben because they had sex over 6 times, so this wasn't just a one-time mistake. The judge also added that the law must be concerned to protect all children from abuse, especially from those in positions of trust and authority. Just because Ben does not see himself as a victim does not mean that what Karen did was not wrong. In the end, she was resentenced to a total of 2 years and 8 months in prison, with 2 years and 2 months suspended. So in the end, she basically only served 6 months in prison, which again is not a very long time, but to a lot of people that was basically better than nothing. Now, Karen was shocked with this new verdict and she feels like she was wrongfully sentenced. In her eyes, she's not a pedophile and she's not some predator that looks for young boys. She continues to say that this was a one-time instance, that Ben was the only minor that she had ever been with, and that again, she didn't look for Ben, Ben looked for her. She was actually crying as she was led to the prison van, and her lawyer said that they were both very upset with this decision and that they were going to appeal it. However, their appeal was denied. Now, when Karen was originally sentenced to no time in jail, Ben's mother spoke out and she was heartbroken. She felt like Karen was going to get away with this abuse, but now that she had been resentenced to at least 6 months in prison, she felt relieved knowing that Karen was going to go to jail and that she was being punished for what she did to her son Ben. She said, quote, "Justice has been done with this woman, and for the other victims of sexual abuse, I feel for them as well. Hopefully she'll sit there for a while and think about how she's affected so many people." End quote. Now, what's really sad is that Ben has actually cut off contact with his mother after she reported Karen to the police. He moved out of the family home and he no longer spoke to his mom. He blames her for Karen losing her marriage, for her losing her home, for losing her job, and for going to jail. Which is just really sad because a lot of people have come out and said, Ben's mom did what any other parent would do. Any other parent would call the police and turn this abuser in, but Ben just doesn't see it that way. and I really hope that one day he is able to forgive his mom and rekindle that relationship. Even Karen has come out in interviews saying, yeah, I agree with Ben's mom. Like, I would have done the same thing if I found out that someone was doing this to my child. And she said that she told Ben, you need to talk to your mother, you need to fix this, but that she can't control Ben. And if Ben doesn't want to speak to his mom, then that's his decision. A lot of people have also pointed out how this is one of those effects that this type of abuse can have on a victim. It can cause you to become estranged from your family because you want to protect your abuser and you don't understand why they would report this or why they would involve the police in something that you see as normal, but is obviously not normal. It's just really sad that he just stopped speaking to his mother, and he also did end up failing his school exams and he ended up dropping out of school. I believe he later went on to attend trade school, but it's just really sad how so many things fell apart after Karen entered his life. Now, before we get into what happened after Karen was released from jail, let's talk about how her sentencing really demonstrates a double standard that people have when it comes to female predators versus male predators. When she was originally sentenced to no jail time, an executive director of the child protection group Bravehearts came out and said, quote, "This is a frightening decision because it sends all the wrong messages to parents, students, and teachers. The message is that you get away with it so long as you make sure the student is right on board and happy." The director also added that just because he is a boy doesn't mean that he consented to this. He was still a minor, he was still a student, and the age of consent law applies equally to boys and girls. So he was basically saying, like, just because Ben was in a sense on board with this because he says that he wasn't a victim and that he doesn't feel damaged by this, doesn't mean that Karen should have gotten no jail time, which again, if you remember, the original judge, Judge Smallwood, said that because Ben didn't see himself as a victim, he decided to not send her to jail. Now, a lot of people have started comparing her case to the case of Gavin Maxwell Hopper. Now, Gavin and Karen's cases are pretty similar. They both taught physical education and they both did something absolutely horrific. Gavin was a 48-year-old teacher who ended up abusing his 14-year-old female student for several years. In the end, Gavin was sent to prison for 3.5 years with the minimum term of 2 years and 3 months. While on the other hand, we have Karen, who was also a teacher who abused her 15-year-old student. So they're both teachers who had very inappropriate relationships with their students. So why did Gavin receive 3.5 years and Karen only receive 6 months? Well, Judge Smallwood, who is a judge that originally sentenced Karen to no time, spoke out about this and said that you can't really compare the two cases because no two cases are ever the same in the eyes of the law. That the main difference between Gavin and Karen isn't that they are male and female, it's the fact that Gavin was known to have done this before and Karen had only done this once before. Apparently, Gavin was known at his school for being a creep, that he was known for flirting with young girls, and that he would try to prey on them. So this wasn't the first time that he had tried to pursue a minor. Now, when Gavin was arrested for abusing his 14-year-old student, he pretty much showed no remorse. He blamed the victim for what happened. He didn't apologize, so it just seemed like he was not actually sorry. Now, as for Karen, she had only ever been with Ben. She had never been with another minor or with another student. People didn't know her for being flirtatious with other students or anything like that. During the trial, she did admit to being guilty. She did show remorse. She did apologize. So with all of those factors together, Judge Smallwood says, like, look at how different these cases are. One person was known for doing this and showed no remorse, and the other person has never done anything like this before and did show remorse. So that's why their sentences were different. And a couple of news articles were trying to make it seem like, oh, well, this was just like a one-time thing. You know, she wasn't actively pursuing young boys. This was more of like a teacher who was trying to behave like a teenager by bombarding with this boy with text messages as if she was just like a flirty little teenager texting her boyfriend. I don't know. I would definitely love to know what you guys think about this. Do you guys agree with what Judge Smallwood was saying, how you can't really compare Gavin to Karen and that their sentence had nothing to do with their gender? Or do you think that it did have something to do with their gender? Now, let's talk about what happened after Karen was released from prison in 2005. She hadn't really done any interviews talking about what happened. However, as soon as she was released from jail, she did do a 60 Minutes interview with a reporter named Liz. Now, apparently 60 Minutes paid Karen $40,000 for the story, and this did make a lot of people angry at the fact that they were paying a convicted sex offender to talk about this. I will have the full episode linked down below because I'm not sure if I can include any clips in here or if it'll get taken down for copyright reasons, but regardless, it will be down below. The interview was very frustrating to listen to, and it was also just really shocking to see that Ben was sitting there right next to Karen being a part of this. It just really did shock a lot of people to see that this convicted sex offender was just sitting down next to her victim talking about this very casually, as if she shouldn't just be staying as far away from him as possible. Now, thankfully, this reporter was on it. She was so intense throughout the entire interview. She really did not show any type of empathy towards Karen, which I felt like Karen was kind of looking for throughout the interview. You know, I felt like she wanted Liz to have empathy for her because she went to prison, she lost her family, you know, etc. But Liz was like, no, like you're a bad person. So in this interview, Karen says that she knew what she was doing was wrong, that if she could take it all back, she would. She says that the nightmare that she has been living for in the past 2 years is horrible. Again, she talks about how she lost her job, she lost her house, she lost her family, and how she also went to prison.
Ben knew what he was doing. I knew what I was doing. I mean, I'm not making excuses at all. It was wrong. What I did was wrong. Look, if I could take it all back, honestly, I would. I mean, the nightmare I've lived for 2 years is I've lost my job, I've lost my marriage, I've been to prison.
Now, by her saying that, again, it just feels like she's not really taking accountability. She's kind of saying, you know, oh my God, look at how much I've suffered because of this, as if she wasn't the adult who could have said no and stopped this from happening in the first place. The reporter responds to this by saying, yeah, you came out of prison as a pedophile. And Karen says, yeah, I did come out as a pedophile, but I don't think I am. But that's what the law says. Liz immediately cuts in and says, no, but you are a pedophile, that's a fact. And Karen just stays quiet. There's this moment of awkward silence, and Ben decides to fill it by saying, well, that's the law. And he kind of just like shrugs it off. Karen starts to defend herself by saying that she didn't pursue young boys, that Ben was a one-off situation, and that she had been a teacher for 15 years and had never had any other type of incident. Liz immediately jumps in and says, okay, so you don't think you're a predator? And before Karen can even answer, Ben steps in and says, well, you could say that I'm a predator because I went after her. And Liz is like, no, like, you know that's not possible, right? You could never be the predator. And he was like, well, apparently I'm the victim. And she says, no, not apparently. You are the victim.
I don't
In
think...
the way it happened, you could say I was a predator. I mean, I went after her.
But you know that that's impossible.
Well,
you can never be the predator. You know that, don't you?
well, apparently I'm the victim, you know, that's...
But you are the victim.
By law, I'm
not
the victim.
apparently, you are.
Yeah, well, by the law, yeah. Yep.
But you don't see yourself as a victim.
Definitely not, no.
As I mentioned, you can find the full interview down below because it truly was shocking to see. Karen and Ben talk about how they still have contact with each other, and Liz tells Karen, do you think that's a good idea? Like, shouldn't you just leave him alone? And Karen's like, well, no, we're friends. We both went through this horrible situation together, and it's just nice to have someone to talk about this with and just help you get through the situation. Liz is just shocked at this and says, he's your victim. Why are you literally going to your victim to help get you through the situation? And Karen's like, well, he messaged me first. Again, like not taking responsibility because it doesn't matter if Ben reached out first. She should have been like, hey, it's probably not a good idea for me to get in contact with my victim. But no, Karen just doesn't see anything wrong with continuing to contact Ben and be friends with him.
What is your relationship now?
Just friends.
Just
I mean, we're
good
always...
friends.
I don't think you can go through an experience like we have and not still have, you know, a close relationship. But I mean, it's purely just friendship, and you know that's the way we both want it.
You still have contact with Ben.
We're friends, yeah.
Is that a good thing to do?
It's not so much as in it's just simply how you're going. We've been through this together. It helps to talk to someone who's also feeling, I
But
suppose.
he's your victim.
Well, yeah. Well,
Shouldn't you be leaving him alone? Shouldn't you allow him to be on his own?
well, it was actually Ben that rang me, so...
But that's okay. Why do you allow that contact to continue on?
Well, We're still friends.
In the interview, they were actually even playing like golf together. They went to go eat, and it's crazy. Also, in this interview, Ben said that he was still having no contact with his mother, which again is just really, really sad. That interview was in 2005, and I have not been able to find an update as to where Karen and Ben are today. I do hope that Ben has healed from this, that he has gone on to live a very happy and full life. I know he doesn't see himself as a victim, but who knows, maybe now that he's older, his viewpoint has changed and he realizes the severity of the situation. Karen was a 36-year-old teacher who abused her position of power and took advantage of this 15-year-old student. Again, it doesn't matter if Ben was the one who pursued her. It doesn't matter if he was the one that kissed her first or the one that flirted with her first. Karen was the adult in the situation. She should have said no. She should have never kissed him back. I don't know where Karen is today. I do hope that she has finally accepted responsibility and has finally stopped putting the blame on Ben. I do also hope that her family is okay. It just must be very difficult for her children to have gone through this and to have had to learn about what their mother did. So I just truly hope that everyone in the situation has healed. Now, at the same time that this trial was happening in November of 2004 with Karen, another similar case was happening all the way back in the United States. Just 1 month before Karen was sentenced in 2004, Mary Kay Letourneau was released from jail after serving 7 years for child rape after she abused her 12-year-old student. I'm sure so many of you are familiar with Mary Kay Letourneau. I actually have a video on her case, which I will have linked down below. The video is a little bit old, so I'm just going to kind of give you guys a summary of what happened with Mary's case. Mary Catherine Schmitz was born on January 30th, 1962 in Orange County, California. In 1984, she attended Arizona State University, and that's when she ended up meeting Steve Letourneau. The two of them fell in love, they got married, and they ended up having 4 children together. Mary eventually headed over to Seattle University where she got her teaching degree, and in 1989 she was hired by Shorewood Elementary School in Washington as an elementary school teacher. Now this is when she ended up meeting 12-year-old Villy Falau. Now Villy was born on June 26, 1983, and he was one of 4 children, and when he first met Mary, he was in the 2nd grade. I believe he was the youngest of the 4 siblings because his other siblings already knew Mary because she had been their teacher beforehand, so Mary was already very familiar with the Falau family. Now, Villy was very artistic. He really enjoyed drawing, so Mary decided to step in and kind of help him develop his drawing skills. Mary was also really good at drawing, and the two of them would hang out after class to just draw and talk to each other. Mary's son, Steve, was around the same age as Villy, so her and her son, Villy, started to get very close to each other. In fact, Villy would often come to Mary's house to spend time with Steve and to have dinner with the family. Now, at the time that all of this was happening, Villy's family life just wasn't the best. To him, it felt nice to have Mary kind of take him under her wing, let him have dinner with her family, and just kind of be a part of it. Now, this should have been a story of how a teacher really helped a student get through a difficult time in their life by acting as a mentor and just acting as a positive figure in their life. Unfortunately, that's not where the story goes. When Villy was only 12 years old, he was abused by his 34-year-old teacher, Mary. Now, this all started in the summer of 1996. Mary was taking a local class at a college, and Villy was there at a summer art school camp. Now, Mary tries to make herself feel better by stating, oh, this was during the summer, so I wasn't his teacher. I was just someone that happened to be at the same college taking a class, and I just happened to run into Villy, who was also there taking a summer course. So she tries to, really emphasize how they were not a student teacher at this moment. Regardless of whether or not Mary wasn't his teacher during this time, I feel like that doesn't make it better because you were his teacher and he still is a minor. Anyways, during this summer break, Villy and Mary began flirting with each other. They began to hang out more, and Mary says that it felt like they were truly boyfriend and girlfriend. Again, this is a 34-year-old lady saying that she felt like she was boyfriend and girlfriend with a teenager. At one point, Villy told Mary that he was in love with her, and apparently she told him to go away, to put those feelings in a box, and to just basically leave her alone and go live his life. However, by the next month in July, the two of them were having sex. So yeah, she told him to put those feelings away, but then a month later started having sex with him. It just doesn't make sense. The summer finally came to an end, and in September of 1996, Billy entered the 7th grade, and that's when Mary discovered that she was pregnant with his baby. Yes, this 34-year-old lady is carrying her 13-year-old student's baby. Now, she did her best to keep this relationship and this pregnancy a secret, but in February of 1997, her husband Steve discovered the truth. He suspected that his wife was having an affair. You know, he just had like that gut feeling that something was wrong. However, he did not suspect that she was having a relationship with her teenage student. Now, the way that he found out about this was that he actually discovered these love letters between Mary and Billy. Now, he confronted Mary about this. She admitted to what was going on, and he didn't want to report her to the police. Now, I imagine that this is like a tricky situation to be in because she's your wife, she's someone that you love, and she's also the mother of your children. So going to the police right away and reporting her for abusing a minor is just not an easy thing to do. So he kind of like stayed quiet about it. However, he did end up telling one of his relatives about what happened. And in March of 1997, that relative went to the police and reported Mary's abuse. Mary was immediately arrested for second-degree child rape. She was released on bail, and then in May of that year, Mary gave birth to her and Billy's daughter, Aubrey. The trial began in August of 1997, and Mary pled guilty to child rape in exchange for a 3-month jail sentence. Now, this plea bargain also stated that she would not be able to have any contact with Billy whatsoever, and that if she broke that contact, she would immediately be sent back to jail.
I did something that I had no right to do, morally or legally. It was wrong, and I am sorry. Please help me. Help us all.
So in January of 1998, Mary finished her 3-month jail sentence, and she also had to register as a sex offender. Again, one of the rules was that she just should not contact Billy, something that seems easy to do. I mean, you literally only served 3 months for R-wording someone, so you would think that she would stay as far away from her victim and just like follow the rules. Well, that is not what Mary did, because just a month later, Mary was caught with Billy. The two of them were found in a vehicle with $6,200 in cash, baby clothing, and with her passport inside the car. All of this together led the police and the community to think that these two were planning to flee the country. Again, I'm not putting the blame on Billy whatsoever. At this point, he is still a teenager, so Mary is the adult here. She should have stayed away from Billy. She should have been nowhere near him. But the fact that just a month after she was released from prison, she immediately went to go find Billy and was planning to flee with him is insane. Mary is once again arrested, and it's revealed that she is actually pregnant for the 2nd time. She appears before the judge, and of course the judge is angry. They're like, hello, we literally gave you such a good deal. All you had to do was stay away from him, and that was it, and you couldn't even do that. So in the end, they sentenced Mary to 7.5 years in prison. While in prison, Mary gives birth to her and Billy's 2nd daughter named Georgia, and while she's behind bars, Billy's mother steps in to take care of the 2 babies. Now, this was such a difficult time for Billy's family. It was just really hard for them to accept what had happened to him. It was also hard for them to accept that Billy became a father at just 13 years old. I mean, he was literally a baby himself, and now he had 2 of his own babies. Billy also says that this was such a difficult time for him in his life and that he really struggled with his depression. He said, quote, "I'm surprised I'm still alive today. I went through a really dark time." End quote. Now, as for how Mary's family was handling all of this, they of course were just as heartbroken. They were shocked, and they were also confused as to how Mary could have done something like this. Steve ended up divorcing Mary, and then him and all 4 of their children moved to Alaska. I'm sure it was difficult for them to stay there and have to deal with the aftermath of what Mary had done to Billy, as well as to their own family. I just cannot imagine how incredibly hard it must have been for the children to try to understand what their mother was arrested for and how she was literally going to be gone for the next 7.5 years. In August of 2004, 42-year-old Mary was finally released from prison, and at this point, Billy was now 21 years old. So he is no longer a minor. He can make his own decisions and he gets to decide what he wants to do. And he decides that he wants to get in contact with Mary. At this point, the no contact order was still active, but Billy decided to file a motion in the court requesting the reversal of the no contact order against Mary. And then just a few days after he files this motion, the judge granted his wish. So Mary and Billy got in contact with each other again and they began dating, and they basically just moved on with their lives and tried to leave all of that behind. That same year that Mary was released, she did an interview with Barbara Walters, and in this interview, she really just did not show any type of remorse. She was honestly glowing in this interview, I will say, but I don't feel like she was glowing in a positive way. I feel like she was beaming with happiness at the fact that she was released, that she was back with Billy, and that he still wanted her. There's this one part in the interview where Barbara asked her, how many hours after you were released from prison did it take for you to get in contact with Billy? And Mary says, oh, not too many hours after the no contact order was lifted. And she kind of says this with like a really sassy, like smirk on her face. And Barbara's like, okay, well, did you contact him or did he contact you? And again, Mary has this smirk on her face and she's like, oh, I waited for him to call me. Again, as if she's proud of the fact that like, yeah, he called me first, he still wants me.
You've only been out of prison about a month. How long after you got out of prison were you in contact with Billy?
Oh,
a day? A week?
Not too many hours after the no contact order was lifted.
Did he call you or did you call him?
I waited for him to call me.
Another part of the interview that really stood out to me is when Barbara asked Mary, do you guys have plans on getting married? And Mary smiles and says, well, we've always planned that and it hasn't changed. When I heard that, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean you have always been planning that? Have you been planning that since he was 12 years old, since he was 13? I mean, he was only 21 when she did that interview, so how long have they been planning on getting married?
You are now how old?
I'm 42.
Billy is 21.
Mm-hmm.
Does this age difference bother you at all?
I'm sure we both wish that we were closer in age so that we would, with more certainty, know that we would have the longest time possible together with each other.
Do you plan to marry Billy?
We've always planned that and it hasn't changed.
When are you going to get married?
Oh, that has not been decided.
Would you like to have more children with Billy?
Well, I'm healthy enough.
Again, she just doesn't see how insane this age gap is and how she literally abused this young teenage boy. There were such big consequences for what she did. I mean, first of all, she abused this young teenage boy. She lost her marriage. Her children moved away. She embarrassed her family. She affected Billy's family. And she also went to prison for this and is now a registered sex offender. Those are some very big consequences. And Barbara asked her, was it worth it? Was being with Billy worth everything that has happened? And Mary just says, oh, well, I don't really see it that way. I see it as, did I do my best? And yes, I think I did do my best.
Mary, was it worth it?
I don't look at life that way. I do my best. So if you asked me that question, did you do your best through every situation? I can say I did my best. I did. I did do my best.
Which again, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean you did your best? Like, how is that your best? Just sleeping with a 13-year-old boy. Anyways, that interview is just crazy. I will have that link down below for you guys to watch. About a year after this interview in February of 2005, Mary and Billy set a wedding date and they ended up getting married on May 20th at a winery in Washington in front of about 250 guests. At this point, Mary was 43 and Billy was 22. From there, the two really just went on about their life. Billy ended up being a DJ for some time. Mary, I believe she was trying to be like a paralegal. I don't really remember exactly what she was doing, but of course she could never go back to teaching. So everyone just kind of like went their own way and just kind of started fresh. In May of 2015, the two celebrated their 10th anniversary, and at this point their daughters were now 17 and 16. They all actually did this interview together with Barbara Walters, and the children just seemed very happy. Billy and Mary also seemed very very happy with each other, and it just seemed like life was going great for them. However, just 2 years after they celebrated their 10th anniversary in 2017, Billy filed for separation. Now, even though he filed for separation, the pair actually did an interview together in 2018 where they stated that they were still married. So it just seems like the divorce wasn't finalized yet. Maybe they were still trying to work things out. Now, this interview was insane. I'm sure you guys have seen clips of this interview all over TikTok and social media because it was just truly shocking. This interview was done by reporter Matt Doron, and the full interview is about an hour and a half long, so I will have that link down below for you guys. Mary was extremely dominant in this interview. I just felt like she was speaking over Billy. She was answering questions that were directed at him, and Billy was more quiet in this interview. He would kind of look to Mary for answers, and it was just really uncomfortable to watch. Again, even after all these years, Mary still just did not seem to understand that what she did was wrong. She still seems flattered at the fact that Billy liked her when he was a teenager, and there was this one part in the interview where Billy was talking about how when he was in school, him and his friends would hide in the classroom closet. That's all he said. You know, he didn't really elaborate more on that story. That was it. However, Mary immediately jumped in and said, well, why don't you tell them the real reason you were hiding in the closet? And Billy says, you know, no, we were just hiding. I don't really want to talk about it. And Mary again says, no, what did you tell me you were doing? Again, just being very dominant and controlling over him. Billy says that he doesn't really want to talk about that because he just feels weird, and Mary just keeps pushing for it until finally Mary says, okay, well, he told me that he would hide in the closet because they were hoping that I would pass by the door so that they could look up my skirt. And she is saying this laughing. I don't know if it's nervous laughter, but I honestly feel like it's laughter because she's flattered at the fact that these teenage boys were just like hoping to like look up her skirt. Now, Billy looks uncomfortable when she shares this story because again, it's obvious that he didn't want to share that, but Mary wanted to say it. She wanted people to know that story because it just adds to that narrative that Billy pursued her and he's the one that liked her first. Something that I also noticed is that Mary did not like it when reporters would refer to her and Billy's relationship as a student-teacher relationship. There is one point in the interview when Matt asks her, Mary, when did you realize you were attracted to a student? And Mary immediately gets upset. She corrects Matt and says, okay, well, he wasn't my student, and you asking that question is trying to make it seem like this was a student-teacher relationship when that's not the case. She again refers to how they were both taking a summer class and how he was not her student during the summer, so because they were outside of school and she was not his teacher, then this is okay. So Matt moves on from this question, and then he goes on to call Billy a little boy, and Mary again gets upset and she corrects him and says, you shouldn't call him a little boy. Matt says, well, that's what he was 13 years old, that's a little boy. And Mary's like, no, he wasn't. Matt's like, okay, fine, he was a teenager if that makes you feel better. And Mary says, there are some 13-year-olds out there who get arrested and tried as an adult, so what angle do you want to come at? Again, just making it seem like, oh my god, you don't understand how mature Billy was for his age. Just because he was 13 years old doesn't mean he wasn't as mature as an adult. Honestly, a lot of people just felt really bad for Billy throughout this interview. They feel like he just seemed uncomfortable and just didn't really want to be there. There's this one moment where Matt asks both of them, you know, if you could go back in time, would you have done this again? And Billy says that he can't really regret that this happened because then he would never have his daughters, which I totally understand, but he says that he doesn't really know what he would have done and that everything could have just been handled differently. He doesn't like how the media put the narrative, how they didn't really care about his feelings or about what he went through, that they mainly cared about just having the story, you know, of a teacher sleeping with a student. So he feels like people just didn't really care about him back then and that they were kind of just like using him for headlines. He also added that now that he's a grown-up, he could never imagine seeing himself with a 13-year-old or ever being romantically involved with a teenager in any way. He literally said, like, my brain just cannot comprehend that. And Mary is sitting down next to him when he is saying this. So the reporter asks Mary, is that hard to hear? And Mary says, no, that situation does not relate to their situation. And she even says that it's never crossed her mind to be with a teenager. Matt interrupts her and is like, but you were with a teenager. You literally were with Billy. And she says, Matt, please stop saying that. I didn't pursue him, and it's never crossed my mind to pursue a teenager. In fact, she says that she's actually in support of the laws that are in place to protect children, but that again, Billy wasn't a child, that he was a teenager, and that he pursued her. I'm going to end this segment talking about this interview because I could just go on and on about this because that interview was insane, but I do just want to mention this very shocking moment from the interview. Matt tells Mary that she was the adult in the situation and that she should have done better. Mary gets upset by this and she says, I was the adult by age, not by maturity. You don't know Billy. And she turns to Billy and she says, who was the boss? Billy mumbles and he says that he doesn't want to answer that question, but Mary just ignores him and says, who was the boss? Who was the boss back then? Billy answers and says, well, yeah, it was me pursuing you, but all I knew is what I knew back then. Mary doesn't accept that as an answer and she just keeps asking him, who was the boss? Billy just looks so uncomfortable and he turns to the reporter and says, this is getting ridiculous. And the reporter says, yeah, this is getting ridiculous. He was 13 years old. And Mary just ignores the both of them and just keeps saying, who was the boss? Who was the boss? Until Billy finally answers and says, well, I was a pursuer. And then that's when Mary finally stops asking. Again, she does not see how this is wrong. She's literally saying that this 13-year-old boy was the boss when she was 34 years old. Now, this interview happened in 2018, and a year later in 2019, their divorce was finalized. Billy and Mary went their separate ways, and then a year later in July of 2020, Mary actually passed away from cancer at the age of 58. 2 months before Mary's death, Billy moved back home to take care of Mary, to be by her side 24/7, and just be there for her in her final days. Even though they were divorced and even though they were living separate lives now, Billy still had love for Mary, and he obviously just didn't want the mother of his children to be alone and to suffer. I remember when the news broke out about Mary's death, there were people that were empathetic to the situation because, you know, this is someone's mother that we're talking about. She had 6 children, and now these 6 children no longer have their mom, so it's a very sad situation. I do have empathy in that regard. It's really sad that she did have to go through cancer and was fighting through a difficult battle towards the end of her life. So some people did feel empathy and just kind of like kept their true thoughts of Mary to themselves. However, there was a lot of people who did not have empathy during this time and were saying that this was basically Mary's karma for what she did. Now, as for where Billy is now, I just really hope that he is doing well. I read that in 2022, he actually became a father for a 3rd time to another baby girl. Now, he doesn't really share much details about his daughter or about the mother of this new daughter, but I just really wish him the best. I truly hope that he has healed from this, that he has found happiness, and that he feels loved. As for the children that him and Mary had, their 2 daughters are now all grown up. In September of 2023, it was reported by Aubrey that her sister Georgia was actually going to become a mother and that Billy was now going to be a grandfather. I believe she already gave birth to her daughter, and I'm just really happy for her. I hope that both Aubrey and Georgia are happy. It must be very hard to go on without their mom and to go through all of this alone. Again, despite everyone's thoughts and opinions on Mary, at the end of the day, Aubrey and Georgia knew Mary as their mother, as someone that they loved and as someone that they could go to for comfort. Now, as for how they feel about their parents' relationship and about everything that happened between them, in 2018, the daughters briefly spoke about this. Aubrey came out and said, quote, I think I understand it. It was surprising to people. It's not really been brought to our attention just because we grew up with it, so we're adapted to it. End quote. I know they haven't really done many interviews speaking about their parents' relationship, which is totally understandable because they have a completely different perspective on their parents. I do think that what Mary did was extremely wrong. It's really sad how she didn't really take responsibility for her actions and just over the years continue to mainly put the blame on Billy as being the boss in this situation and as being the pursuer. Again, just like Karen, she was the adult. She should have said no and she should have stopped this from happening. Karen and Mary just have so many similarities, especially in the sense that they put the blame kind of on the victim. Karen said that Ben was just really mature for his age, that he kissed her first, that he contacted her first when she was released from prison, and the same with Mary. You know, she says that Billy was very mature, that he was not like like other teenage boys, again, that he pursued her first. So by them just saying that, it just seems like they don't really understand how they could have put a stop to this at any point. Yes, they have said sorry before, and yes, they have said that they regret it. But when they add that the boys pursued them first, I just feel like it really negates their apologies. Now, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned how oftentimes cases involving female teachers abusing their male students is often looked at as less severe than if it was a male teacher pursuing a female student. A lot of the times people feel that the males probably wanted this, that they're just horny teenagers who are fulfilling a fantasy by sleeping with their hot teacher. This type of scenario is often portrayed in movies and in TV shows, and I'm sure in books. I know it's also portrayed, reversed. I mean, we have Ezra and Arya from Pretty Little Liars, which is like a whole separate thing that I can do a deep dive into as well. So I know that that's also portrayed as well. However, lately I have been seeing a lot of movies and TV shows about female teachers hooking up with their male students. Again, they make it seem like this is some type of cool thing to achieve. So let's get into a couple of movies and TV shows made about this. Let's start off by talking about May December. That's the whole reason why I made this video in the first place, because I watched the movie and I could not believe people's reaction to this movie. Now, May December is loosely based off of Mary Kay Letourneau and Billy Falau. The movie stars Julianne Moore, Natalie Portman, and Charles Melton. Julianne plays a character named Gracie who is 36 years old and begins a sexual relationship with her 13-year-old employee Joe. Now, Natalie, she plays an actor in the movie that is going to play Gracie in an upcoming film about this relationship. So she tries to get close to Gracie and to Joe to learn more about them, to learn more about their story so that she can play them well. Gracie and Joe have 3 children who are now all going off to college. The movie is also about what's going to happen to them now that all of their children are leaving the nest. Were they together because they actually loved each other, or were they just together because of the children? It also brings the question of, has Joe ever fully accepted what happened to him and how Gracie abused him at 13 years old? I feel like the movie was pretty much solely based on Mary and Billy. However, the director says that it was only loosely based. However, they did put a scene in the movie that was kind of recreating Mary and Billy's interview where she was asking him who was the boss. However, in the movie, Gracie is asking Joe who was in charge over and over again. Now, as for how Billy feels about this movie, he actually said that he was offended by this movie because, again, it's partially based on what happened to him, and he just wonders why Netflix didn't reach out to him to be a part of the project. He said, quote, "I'm still alive and well. If they had reached out to me, we could have worked together on a masterpiece. Instead, they chose to do a ripoff of my original story. I'm offended by the entire project and the lack of respect given to me, who lived through a real story and is still living it." End quote. Now, with this movie, I haven't seen too many people saying, oh, Joe was so lucky to hook up with his hot boss or anything like that. It honestly seems like a lot of people do understand the point of the movie, which to me was to show the long-lasting effects that this type of abuse can have on a victim. To show how oftentimes predators do put the blame on the victim, and to show that what Gracie did was truly wrong. Gracie in the movie defends herself and makes it seem like her and Joe are completely in love, when that's not really the case. Honestly, it just feels like Joe is trapped with Gracie, with his abuser for the sake of his children. So I was happy that people were responding to this movie with empathy and understanding how Joe was the victim. However, that was not really the response for a Hulu show called A Teachers, starring Kate Mara and Nick Robinson. Now, this show, it's wild. I finished it in a week. It was really good. It was so emotional and just so disturbing. Now, let me read you guys the description of the show. This drama series examines the complexities and consequences of an illicit sexual affair between a young teacher and her student. Claire is a new teacher at Westerbrook High School in Texas. Dissatisfied in her marriage to her college sweetheart, Claire's life changes when Eric, a personable teenager in her English class, takes an interest in her. Again, it just kind of feels like it could be loosely based off of Mary Kay Letourneau. What I really liked about the show is how they demonstrated how this type of relationship can really affect the victim. Again, there's people out there who do not believe that males can be abused or that they aren't as affected as females are. They make it seem like these high school boys wanted this, that they were happy to hook up with their hot female teacher, but no. Now, spoiler alert, because I'm kind of going to spoil the show right now, but it basically ended with Claire and Eric meeting 10 years later after everything happened. At this point, Claire has remarried, she has children, and she is living her best life. life, while Eric has really been struggling to cope with the aftermath of the abuse. During this meetup, Eric tells Claire that he finally understands how he was a victim in the situation, and Claire defends herself and says, "You kissed me first. You pursued me," demonstrating how just 10 years later, she still doesn't understand how she was the adult in the situation, and that even if Eric did pursue her, even if he did kiss her first, she should have put a stop to it because it's just wrong and she's the adult. It just really shows how Claire has been in denial all this time and that she's basically just been telling herself lies to make herself feel better and to minimize her guilt. Eric is shocked at her response, and it just truly breaks your heart to see how his whole life has changed because of what his teacher did. He says that the relationship they had changed him forever and it just damaged him so much, while Claire just looks fine. You know, she moved on to a new marriage, to a big house, to kids, and he's over here still trying to pick up the pieces. I just really thought that the show's ending was important because, again, it just showed how this type of sexual abuse does affect men too, and how it needs to be acknowledged. Now, the reason why I also bring this show up is because a lot of people actually blame Eric for what happened. I know it's just a fictional show and he's just a character, but people have really been mean to Eric, and they're like, oh, well, Eric shouldn't have kissed her, he shouldn't have pursued her, he shouldn't have gotten in the backseat of her car. Again, as if he wasn't the minor and a student in the situation. There's so many people online who put the blame on Eric and not on the adult teacher who was married and should have said no. There's also a handful of people who are like, oh my god, Claire is so hot, Eric should feel happy that he got laid by such a hot teacher, and how they wish they would have been laid by their hot teacher as well. Again, I know that these are fictional characters, but these type of comments and this reaction to the show just mimics the reality of how male victims are often treated. I know I'm mentioning cases involving teachers and students, but this type of abuse can happen at any age, you know? It doesn't only happen to teenagers or to students. Those are just examples that I'm showing in this video, but abuse can happen to males at any age, as a baby, a child, a teen, and even as an adult. So let me read you some comments that I've seen online about Karen Ellis and about Mary Kay Letourneau. These comments were left under a video about Karen. Someone put, quote, "I'm not condoning this woman's conduct, but as a formal, very hormonal 15-year-old boy, I'd have found it absolutely impossible had my then very delectable art teacher decided I needed extra attention in biology. I still think of her till this day until I realized she'd be well into her 70s now." Another person wrote, "Yeah, come on. I'm sorry, but I've only seen a teenager whose hormones went crazy and he had an affair with a much older woman who was also his teacher. If she was 19, was she still considered a pedophile? There are a lot of intimate relationships between high school students and university students, that is, between minors and adults, regardless of gender. I don't see them going to prison. It is only the difference in age and status that makes this situation immoral." Then we have someone else writing, "The only thing I feel when I hear about cases like these is jealousy. Men are different when it comes to this. I would have died happy if that woman had seduced me when I was 15. You have no idea how much confidence I would have gained. It would have had such a positive impact on my life. Instead, I was just bullied by my teachers and classmates, LOL." So those are just a couple of the comments that I have seen about the situation. Again, just making it seem like these boys were not harmed by what happened to them, that they fulfilled a fantasy, and some of them even feel sorry for Karen or for Mary because their lives were ruined by these young teenage boys that pursued them first. Now, according to statistics, 1 in 6 men in the United States have experienced some form of sexual abuse before the age of 18. It's really sad that oftentimes this type of abuse goes unreported and unrecognized. Now, the type of effects that this assault can have on a child male victim can range from more likely engaging in risky behavior such as drug and alcohol use, engaging in unsafe sex, or engaging in criminal behavior. They are also most likely to experience anxiety, depression, and just difficulty forming relationships than those who did not experience abuse. Melbourne psychologist Michael Carcraig has spoken out a lot about what happened between Karen Ellis and Ben Dunbar. He is still just very upset at the fact that Karen basically puts the blame on Ben. He is also very vocal about how this type of abuse can really affect the victim's schoolwork and vocational work. He says that school can just become incredibly difficult for the victim, that all they can really think about is going to school to see the teacher, not to do their work, not to be with their friends or anything like that, that basically their whole world starts to revolve around this predatory adult who oftentimes is their teacher, which he believes in a way is what happened to Ben because, as we know, he failed his exams and he also dropped out of school. Dr. Michael also went on to say that teachers who have their students could be going through a relationship crisis, perhaps an impending divorce, and that they often just feel deflated and they feel desolated inside. So when all of a sudden they get a little bit of attention from anybody, even from a minor, from a student, this in their eyes is perceived as positive attention and they respond to the need for intimacy instead of following the rules and not engaging with a minor or with a student. I know this video has just been so incredibly long, but I just think that this topic is very important because, I have young nephews and I have young male cousins, and I just would never want something like this to happen to them in the first place. But if something did happen to them, I would want them to feel as if they could speak out about this and report the abuse because people would believe them. Again, it's just a huge issue right now how male victims are often not believed, and of course female victims go through the same thing as well, but a lot of people just have the mentality that a man cannot be abused, and that's simply not true. For any survivor of sexual abuse, it can be very difficult to understand what happened to you, and it can be incredibly difficult for you to come forward. It's just really important to remember that you are not alone, that there are other boys and men who have also experienced something similar, and that there is help out there for you. There's this amazing organization called 1 in 6, because again, 1 in 6 men are victims of sexual abuse. And before I end the video, I just want to read to you a couple of myths and facts that they have about male sexual abuse. Myth: boys can't be sexually abused. Fact: boys and men can be sexually abused or used, and it has nothing to do with how masculine they are. Myth: it was his fault, especially if he got aroused. Fact: if a boy liked the attention he was getting or got sexually aroused during the abuse, or even sometimes wanted the attention or sexual contact, that does not mean that he wanted or liked being manipulated or abused, or that any part of what happened in any way was his responsibility or fault. Myth: sexual abuse is less harmful to boys than girls. Fact: sexual abuse and assault harms boys and men and girls and women in ways that are similar and different, but both equally harmful. This organization is just so amazing. They have so much helpful information, so that will be linked down below, as well as some other resources if you or someone you know is a victim of sexual abuse. Anyone can also contact the National Sexual Assault Hotline by calling 800-656-4673. Or you can also go online to chat 24/7 by going to online.rain.org. Thank you all so much for being here and for taking the time to listen to today's video. I know this video was just incredibly long. I cannot believe that I have been talking here forever. I really just want to chug my water right now because my throat is so itchy, but I just felt like this video was so important. So I really hope that you guys learned more about this. I would really appreciate if you guys could share this video or just share the resources that I have linked down below because it's just a really important topic. So yeah, I think I'm going to end this video here. There are so many more cases that I'm going to be talking about, so make sure to hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the notifications. That way you guys don't miss out on any future videos. I would love to hear your thoughts about this down below, and with that, I will see you all in the next video. Bye everyone!